Hello, so I thought I might talk about manga a little bit for anyone that's interested in what is manga. And these are your Japanese comics or your Japanese graphic novels. So manga is a Japanese form of storytelling that is essentially their comics in Western culture. There are really not that a lot of differences, although there are a few, and we will approach those. So, just like Western comics, manga is a written and illustrated story that can cover a wide variety of genres and themes. Um, there are very dark manga. There are very brutal manga. There's also a lot of comedic and children's manga and everything in between. So just like in a comic book, there is a wide variety. It's not just for children, not just for adults. There's everything. Now, you do read manga in the traditional Japanese format, meaning you go from right to left. So for a Western audience, that you actually start at the back of the book. So it's the opposite of how we read. Now, that can be problematic for some people. In fact, I did not read manga for years because I just couldn't handle it. I don't know why. My brain just couldn't operate that way. And then one day it could. And ever since then, I've been able to read manga pretty seamlessly. It's very enjoyable, and I've been able to expand my collection. But like I said, I had problems for years trying to read manga, and then all of a sudden it just clicked one day. Other people, it clicks right away, and some people never really figure it out. It's just very ingrained to read one way versus the other. So that is something that can be tricky. Now, there are Western publishers that do mirror the manga to where it is a more Western style, although there are problems with that, where the story might not make sense, dialogue might not make sense. So you do need to be careful of that. Just give it a try. Like I said, it may take a while for it to actually click, but once it does, it's fairly seamless transition. Now, in the US, we see manga sold in book form. And so what you're getting is very similar to like a trade paperback. You're getting several issues, typically 3 issues in a book. So we buy volumes. So in the US, you buy volume one, volume two, rather than get the individual release, the individual story. Now, these are obviously written in Japanese, right? They're coming out of Japan, they're written in Japanese. So if you're looking for American translation, so if you want English translations, or if you're waiting for, French, German, Spanish, Chinese, those tend to be the other large language groups that it gets translated into, it does take a while. And it can take several months to get an English translation. So I know for some series, we're fully a year behind what is actually coming out in Japan. Now, that also lends itself to them being printed in book form in America because you're already waiting for the translations. So you might as well, while you have an English translator and an American distribution company, you might as well just format it into the volume of book and sell it that way. Now, there was an attempt to do traditional, like shonen magazines and stuff in the US. They met with varied success. Not really a whole lot of successful ones actually came through, especially with the English translations. But there have been a few that have stuck, although they're all digital now. Now, according to Forbes and a few other statistical or business watch groups, I think I saw Newsweek, um, Statistica, oh, I can't remember all of them, but they all have done market research or looked at market trends. And manga is actually more popular worldwide than American Western style comics. And even in America, manga is having a surge in popularity. In fact, they are quickly becoming as popular as traditional comics, which makes sense given that they are, in essence, just traditional comics made in Japan. So it kind of makes sense that they're becoming as popular. So, some similarity to comics. Again, they can cover a wide range of genres and themes, and they can be written for any person in any age group. In Japan, they are often sold periodically, right? So monthly for most of them, as we see here in the US. But in the US, we buy them as volumes more akin to trade paperbacks. Now, there are very popular characters that are instantly recognizable both in their home countries and abroad in both manga and Western comics, right? So Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, they're recognized the world over. But if you were to talk like Astro Boy, right? There are people in the US who don't even like comics or manga who would know who Astro Boy is. So there are instantly recognizable characters everywhere. Now, there are differences, even though these are just Japanese comics, there are differences to a more traditional Western comic. So, manga is typically done in black and white rather than color. There are a few color series out. Um, they take longer to make and they are more expensive, so you pay more for them typically. Also, there are special editions of books that you can buy in color. I know that I have bought special editions where they have gone ahead and colored the original black and white manga for the special edition, which is kind of interesting. But traditionally, you are getting a black and white comic when you buy manga. Now, the comics tend to be sold by themselves. So, right, you buy Spider-Man issue 63 and Superman issue 4 and, X-Men Gold issue 5. So, that's how you buy those books. Whereas manga is sold in an anthology magazine, meaning that several similar story types are put together. So, in the US, you might see something, to put that in US terms, you might see a magazine that had all of the Avengers in it for Marvel, and so you would see the Avengers, new Avengers comic. You would also see the new Captain America, the new Iron Man, the new Thor, right? They would all be together in the same magazine, which would be rather thick, right? It would be about the size when the normal trade paperback and cost as much too. And that's different than what we would normally see, but that's how they tend to be sold in Japan, is actually in that bundled format. What is interesting about manga is that while it can fit any genre, and much like comics in the Western world, right, they fit every genre, in manga, there are actually very well established and very specific subgenres that tend to be the driving force behind how you look for a particular manga. And these are defined by target audience age primarily, but also story or plot type and character type. So the most popular one is probably shonen, which is meant for younger boys and tends to be rowdy and fighting. So you have rowdy characters and you have fighting. Now that fighting might be like brawling or it might be sports, just some sort of major competition with rowdy characters that are aimed at selling to younger male audience. So, some sports ones, like one of the most popular ones ever, Slam Dunk, was actually a shonen. It's about young boys playing basketball. You also have things like Naruto, you have Bleach, you have My Hero Academia, right? Younger audience, rowdy characters, primarily around some sort of competition or fighting. Versus you can have love stories, right? And there's very interesting love story subgenres. There's hetero characters written for male audience. There's hetero characters written for female audience. There's gay male characters written for a gay male audience, and gay male characters, so homosexual males, written for a female audience. There's the homosexual females written for the homosexual female audience, and the homosexual females written for the male audience, right? All those are very specific subgenres that all have their own name and all have their own tropes, all have their own following. There's adult, child, male, female, all of these combinations. So very, very specific. Now, you don't need to necessarily know all those, just that they do exist and that can make purchasing them easier if you're trying to find a specific story type. Now, we talked a little bit about the popularity earlier, but manga titles are actually the top selling comic book styles in the world, One Piece actually being the most sold comic volume in the world. Now, that is partly because outside of Japan, you can only buy them as volumes typically, meaning all the foreign language sales count in towards that volume sale. So that really does help drive those sales number up. And in a fun little quirky thing about how definitions can be used and how stats are figured, Spider-Man is still the most sold comic worldwide, even though One Piece is also the most sold comic book worldwide. It just goes with how things are defined. Spider-Man in its singularity. So Spider-Man is the most sold comic worldwide. It is the most popular comic and comic book hero worldwide. However, One Piece does sell more books overall because it sells the volumes, and it only sells volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have to buy that. Versus Spider-Man, you can buy it in multiple formats. You can buy it as a comic book, you can buy it as a trade paperback, you can buy it as an omnibus, you can buy it as a graphic novel, right? Versus One Piece, you're buying it as a volume. So, kind of how those stats are used and how those definitions are used. Still, that's pretty interesting to me that, the most sold comic book is One Piece, is a manga. Now, monthly comics are usually released as part of a magazine. We talked about that earlier, the anthology magazine. Weekly Shonen Jump is the most popular manga magazine. And at one point in the, golden era of manga, which we're not in anymore, but we have seen kind of a resurgence, right, especially with international popularity. It was selling 6.5 million copies a week, which is ridiculous, being as it's you have to buy 4 of them every month in order to get all of it because these were released weekly. So you had to buy 4 of them a month, so one every week, and they're selling 6.5 million copies weekly. That is a staggering number. Manga is valued in the billions, as is the comic industry, but manga is valued in a number of billions. That's just amazing. Now, again, alluding to something I mentioned earlier, there are many, many characters and stories that are well known even to Western audiences that might not be involved in comics and manga. So, again, Astro Boy to me is probably the most recognizable manga for most people, regardless of background. Now, those who have a background in comics or something like that might talk about Bleach or Naruto or My Hero Academia, which are the more current popular ones that have taken off in worldwide popularity. But you could even talk to me about like Fist of the North Star, which was so popular back in the 90s that even I knew about it, and I barely knew comics back then. I mean, I loved them, I was just too poor to afford them. I didn't know as much, but even I knew about Fist of the North Star, which was a manga. So again, there is this increasing popularity that is. So, if you're wanting to talk about what are some of the most well-known manga titles, you have Astro Boy, Slam Dunk, One Piece, Fist of the North Star, Bleach, Dragon Ball. I mean, pretty sure everyone knows Dragon Ball. That could be one of those that's, on the top of everyone's list that they know exists is Dragon Ball. Some others, right? Some of the more popular recent ones. My Hero Academia is incredibly popular in the West. I know for me, some of my personal favorites are like Berserk. I love the Saga of Tanya the Evil, which is Yojo Senki in Japanese, which the name actually means a lot of different. So that's kind of an interesting thing about language, about how the title of a project can change the way you read it. So once I learned the Japanese title, it actually changed how I viewed the story because Yojo Senki is basically just child soldier, young woman soldier, which is different than Tanya the Evil, right? You come in with a different preconceived notion of what this character development is about. Some other ones that I really enjoy, like The Devil is a Part Timer, anything by Junji Ito. Like he's as famous as Stephen King is inside that world, and makes some just fantastic, phenomenal horror manga. Um, I'm really into like Overlord, which is another popular one here in the West. So again, there are some very, very popular manga titles out there, and you can find something that fits you. No matter what your tastes are, there's probably a comic that exists of it, and there's probably a manga that exists to fill it too. And in fact, multiples of both. So don't be afraid to give it a try. Like I said, it took me a little while to get my brain around it, but once it clicked, it clicked. and I was just fine. And I know other people who have had no problem reading manga from the start. Their brain just figured it out and they worked with it. And I know people that still have problems. And don't think it, matters on your intelligence level or anything like that. I've known very intelligent people who picked it up instantly and others who almost never did. And I know some people that we might call less intelligent that picked it up instantly and others that have still have problems now. So it's not an intelligence thing, it's just how you read. So just give it a little bit of a chance. There are some very, very cool stories out there. All right. Thank you.